Welcome, everyone, to the Daily Fantasy Pivot on RotoCurve. We are, of course, a show aimed to teach the masses. We like appealing to everyone, teaching you how to play the game. Today, it's specifically daily fantasy basketball. Again, we're here to help enhance your skills, cater to everyone, interact with you during the show. So feel free to hit us up on Twitter, the RotoCurve chat, just about everywhere. I will be looking. Again, don't forget to check out the free roll this Friday. It is this Friday, right, Collacchi?
Definitely, yep. Can't wait for it, actually.
Okay, it is on DraftKings. It is www.rotocurve.com/ free roll not backslash. You can also find the NBA tools on rotocurve.com. You will notice today we are a man down. Jim McCormick, one of our contributors, I'm kind of upset. I will not be able to make any old jokes about him today. He is out having a baby, so there will be an additional member of the RotoCurve team. Maybe we'll get to meet him or her very soon. But Jim, good luck. We are rooting for you. All right, to the other contributors. The king of the NBA tools again. Make that joke every week. But Josh Collacchi, we didn't have too much disagreement before the show today, so I don't know how entertaining it's going to be for everyone.
That's bad. That's really bad. That means all of our players are going to have goose eggs, right?
Oh, there's absolutely no question that if we agree on things, the world might end. So keep stay tuned for that. Nick, you are coming off one of your best nights in daily fantasy. Do you have any tips for us tonight, us amateurs?
I told you not to mention it. I don't want to jinx myself, man.
No. I didn't ask. I just said that you had a good night. I didn't say great.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
made sure to keep the lingo as mush as possible.
Nah, but that Lakers Nets game treated me well last night.
There you go. Well, so here's a topic from last night that I wanted to tackle kind of immediately because I noticed a weird, kind of interesting trend that if you look at previous data sometimes, I know we're probably going to mention it this time, Dwight Howard against the Pelicans or Chris Paul against, the Oklahoma City Thunder. If you see good results, you tend to like want to jump on the player. But last night, if you looked at results, Al Horford was actually the guy against the Golden State Warriors who had that previous data, and Paul Millsap ended up going off. So I want to ask you guys how much, we can all use StatMuse, type in, such and such player against his previous team. I know we all use that. How much validity do you put into, past matchups, or do you look more at, the pace, the DVP, the fantasy points allowed? What do you look at for matchups?
I think the first thing
I
that,
don't.
go ahead, Nick. I'd like to take this one because I have different thoughts, I think.
All
Go
right,
ahead,
yeah.
Nick.
I don't take into account too much of past results against same said team or whatever. But yeah, I'll definitely look at it. Like tonight, I know Russell Westbrook hasn't had very good numbers against the Clippers in the past 3 years or so. I think in his last like 8 matchups, he's been under 39 FanDuel points like 6 out of those 8 times, which is pretty crazy. But I look at Vegas pace. What else do I look at? Defensive efficiency per position. I take that into consideration a lot when I'm making like tiebreakers. But that's pretty much it for me, man.
Blotchy?
The first thing that I look at when we're looking at the past results is if it's the same situation, because that's basically one of the biggest tellers of that particular instance. And when we were talking about Horford, of course, the game he had previously against Golden State, it was something like what 26-14, couple of blocks, 8 assists. Now that I think is how you fall into variance. You fall into that trap that X player did this against X team, he's going to do it again. And I don't think you can go strictly like that. But like Nick was saying, if there's a potential for if that particular circumstance is going to happen again, if there's a big sample size looking back, like for example, I know we all talk about Harden against the Clippers and how they played defense against them and stuff like that. I think you can look at it. But if it was just one particular instance over a short period of time, I don't think it's worth using simply because the sample size is too small for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, some of them, like Vucevic against the 76ers, I mean, a lot of times it's going to make sense, right? It's going to be
Yeah.
a player against a weak defense in a fast-paced matchup, and he gets his. So instead of using, DVP, maybe maybe you look at it and you analyze why that happened. Was the guy just hot shooting, or was there some other reason? I don't think there's, I would focus on how a player's done the last time, because as we've seen, I know Giannis has done it a few times this season, where he's played against a team and his history was mediocre, and all of a sudden, he flirts with a triple double. And if you just looked at his past matchup, you weren't getting those stats. For those of you asking, since I see you guys, I'm wearing a Andre Johnson All-Star jersey, just so you know, just so everyone's clear of what I am wearing, just to make that make that distinction. It is Andre Johnson Pro Bowl jersey. I'm not wearing an American flag. All right, let's
Nobody's
get on.
asking about your pants, right? It's just your.
No, everyone's pretty sure that I'm not wearing pants, and they would be correct in that assumption.
So you
That's
have
gotta
Andre
help.
Johnson pants on too. That's weird. All right.
There you go. Let's get on to the slate today. We've got 11 games. In terms of injuries, it looks like Rudy.
Look like Ricky's frozen in time. Nick, you see that too?
Yeah, I was wondering if that was my computer.
Yeah, it looks like.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Yeah.
Andre Johnson just hacked into your internet.
There you go. So I was going over the slate that there's 11 games, that Rudy Gay's injured and Michael Carter Williams is kind of an iffy. Is there anyone else who is of concern on the injury report to you guys?
Evan Fournier, Taj Gibson, both doubtful in that first game of the night. So those are pretty big injuries.
Yeah, Lou Williams isn't going to play either, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. So.
There you go. So that's the most important injury stuff. Let's get started with point guards. I'll just shoot out the first one. Chris Paul, I think, is like the biggest lock of the night for me, especially on fantasy draft and DraftKings. I think he's underpriced for this matchup. At least 52 fantasy points in each of his last 3 meetings against Russell Westbrook. I've just become a big Chris Paul fan without Blake Griffin. He's basically their whole offense. He's got at least 40 fantasy points, or 42.75 in each of his last 9 meetings. So this matchup is obviously good for him. I mean, Griffin's been active for a bunch of those. So I think you could legitimately expect close to 50 fantasy points from Paul tonight. Josh, who do you like at point guard?
You're basically reading off the same notes that I have. That's exactly what I have for just for FanDuel instead. He's been over 43 in each of the last 6 games, and of course that has been mostly with Blake Griffin. And we all know that Chris Paul's usage rate and his assist rate actually too, with Griffin being a good passer, goes up with him off the floor. So that's definitely an increase. But the first thing that I looked at point guard today was obviously the decision between Westbrook and Chris Paul. And I think we all agree that between those two guys, it is going to be Paul for us, simply because he's been much better on an individual basis defending Russell Westbrook as opposed to the contrary. And Nick mentioned it earlier. Westbrook has, you said something like 6 of his last 8 were below 35 fantasy points or something like that, Nick?
39, yeah.
Yeah, so that's not what we want. 39 FanDuel points at 11,000, I think he is on FanDuel, especially on a slate like tonight, just not going to cut it for me. You agree with going CP3 over Russ as well?
Yeah, I think it's a 3-way belief here that Paul is much better play than Westbrook tonight. So I'm locking him into cash lineups, and then I really like Kemba Walker again tonight against the Sixers. Way up in pace, didn't play very much yesterday and still shredded the Suns. Should be well rested after playing, I think, only 30 minutes yesterday or something like that. It was way below his normal average, though. I'm going to look real quick. But I think this matchup is just prime for him to go off again, and he'll be super low owned, I think, because no one really pays attention to Kemba too much.
Yeah, the weird thing about Kemba is his home and away splits. Both him and Batum have them this year. He's averaging about, I think it's exactly 2 points more per game at home, along with, he's shooting 44% opposed to about 41 on the road. But against Philadelphia, I don't think you can worry about it. I think the matchup certainly cancels out the split. I think he'll be just fine. So I agree with you. Anyone else you guys want to throw out there before I go through my long list of point guards like I always do?
Go ahead, Nick.
I like Mike Conley and Ricky Rubio a lot too. It's in that like $6,000-7,000 range, and they're super up pace. Conley against the fast-paced team, the Kings. He's had 2 bad games against the Kings this year with I think like under 25 FanDuel points in both, but I'll still trust him in this spot because Marc Gasol's out, and then Rubio against the Wizards is a pretty good spot as well. High-paced game against a team that doesn't play much defense on the perimeter.
Collacchi, go ahead.
I like the guy on the other side of Rubio, actually, John Wall. I know this is probably what our ninth or tenth show, and I've mentioned Wall about 900 times now, something like that. But yeah, I just love his matchup against Minnesota. We have him in our DVP chart as 24th against point guards, and of course, we mentioned that stat on the last episode that Wall leads the NBA in touches per game now. Is that right?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
leads the
So
NBA.
yeah, we're getting that. We're getting the bonus of the matchup. Of course, that game's going to be fast-paced with the Wizards playing. And I think before the show we were mentioning, Nick said that over/under is actually higher than we expected too. So that's going to give us a little bit of a bonus there. And the last point guard I like tonight is D'Angelo Russell against the Nuggets. Russell's going to be in probably 90% of all my lineups, cash, GPP, everything, especially on FanDuel, his price. The Nuggets are 28th against point guards in our DVP chart. And the one thing about Russell and his recent performances is his price is not fully appreciated to what it should be. So you're still getting him at a bargain. He's in the low 5,000s on FanDuel, and he just came off an excellent night of 50 fantasy points. He had 31 and 38 in his last two before that, and Lou Williams is out. So all these things are going in his favor. I think he's going to be one of the highest known players on every site tonight, and he's going to be definitely in my cash lineups.
Yeah, I don't think you can worry about Russell's ownership tonight. I mean, 39 points last night. This is eventually what you're going to get from, one of the game's best prospects. It was just a matter of time with Julius Randle. I think we all agreed with that. And now that Russell's in the lineup, it's not even just a matter of time. He went off last night. This is just a good NBA player. So I think Randall needs to be locked in there. He's only 10-8 on fantasy draft. I've been writing every day that until he's 12,000, I'm not going to think twice. And another good matchup for him. So I got no reason to look anywhere else. I think if you are fading him, maybe in tournaments or maybe even complimenting him, I think Jordan Clarkson works nicely too because you talk about a guy that benefits from Lou Williams sitting out. I think he goes up about 8 fantasy points a game without him. He's averaging 37.3 fantasy points per game without Lou Williams this season. I mean, I think we do expect Kobe to suit up, right? He's probable.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Kobe will play, but sort of like the Nuggets have been. They're going to go 3 guards. They're going to go, a lot of Russell, Clarkson, and Kobe playing the small forward, and I think they're going to match up against him with it. So I really like Clarkson along with Russell. I think you can play both in a single lineup and not worry about it because that's where a lot of their offense comes from. I think Drew Holiday is worth considering, but I will caution that I don't think he's a great tournament play. His usage rate goes down from 32.1% without Gordon to only 27% with him. But with that being said, I like the pace of this matchup. I like the fact that Beverly's going to start the game and he's going to come off the bench, so he won't be playing a ton of minutes against Beverly. So I do like Holiday. Of the guys you mentioned, I think Conley, is a cash play. But I think if I'm playing a guy on the Grizzlies, it's going to be their power forward. So I don't think I'm going to go with Conley, even though I understand the play. And I do want to mention Isaiah Thomas too, but I think he's GPP only. I think Damian Lillard's defense has been, much overrated in terms of how bad it is when you look at the numbers. So I think Thomas is a tournament play, but I think for cash, I'm sticking, Chris Paul, the Lakers guys, and maybe even Rajon Rondo, who's pretty much a triple-double threat every time he steps in. I missed him, but I do think for DraftKings and fantasy draft only that Rondo's one of the better values as, people kind of overlook him. Anything else at the point guard position, anyone?
Not for me.
I like Isaiah Cannon if he gets to start again at min price on FanDuel, but that's about it. You covered pretty much everything else.
Yeah. I just want to give options for tournaments. It's a big slate. I don't think locking in Chris Paul in all your tournament lineups is the greatest way to go, but I do think he's great for cash. All right, moving on to shooting guard. I'm going to start with the guy that I love tonight. Collacchi's been giving me crap all day about how I pronounce this guy's last name. I'm going to call him Zach Levine. You could call him Zach Levine. Whatever you call him, I like him. As long as he's starting, and I do expect him to start. Washington struggles against the wings. They're in the bottom, I think, 7 of fantasy points allowed to both shooting guards and small forwards. And we know Levine, whatever you want to call him.
Not Noel, I know that.
I guess his Hebrew name's Levine. If you want to start him, he does play shooting guard a lot next to Ricky Rubio. That's one of their better lineups in terms of their efficiency. And Levine has scored at least 26.5 fantasy points in each of his last 9 starts. His last 2 have been very, very good. I think he's just improving as a player. What does everyone else like at shooting guard? Nick, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'm paying up for Harden tonight. Harden's my boy. I go over Harden all the time, like Collacchi goes over John Wall, but I just love him. His floor is so high, and it's just a prime spot against the Pelicans. High-paced game, over under of what's the over under this game? 219.5 from this morning. Close game at 5.5 point spread. So I don't think this one's going to get too out of hand, and I just love this spot for Harden. I'm going to pay. He's the guy I'm going to pay it for next to Chris Paul.
Yeah, I'm with you on Harden. I think if there's anybody that you do pay up for, if you can only pay up for one guy, it's going to be Harden, especially for me on FanDuel as well. We always talk about checking all the boxes, and honestly, if there was ever a perfect storm, it's today for Harden. He's the best player in our DBP tool with a massive plus 15.3 rating. And if you're familiar with the tool, anything above 8 or 9 is good. So 15.3 is just ridiculous. And I think that speaks to the matchup against the Pelicans. We now have Eric Gordon back. That definitely gives him a benefit there. The Pelicans are 29th against shooting guards, 27th against point guards. So either way, Harden's going to have a good matchup there. The game is a high over-under, very close spread, as Nick just mentioned. And Harden has 45 FanDuel points. I think it's over 50 if you're playing on DraftKings. In 7 of his last 8 games. That only one game was against Kawhi Leonard, who we all know is one of the best defenders in the NBA. So I think the guy that's been on fire so far, he has a great matchup. And considering the fact that he has that upside for 75 fantasy points or more, he's the guy that I'm plugging in my lineups basically as my first clip tonight.
Well, let me ask you guys, how do you rank the studs tonight? Because there are a lot of them. We've already been over a bunch of them. Is Harden your top priority guy? Are you leaning towards Durant or Cousins, or where does Harden fit into that that grouping?
If we get Anthony Davis news, I'd probably go Harden, Anthony Davis, and Chris Paul. But right now, it's Harden and Chris Paul are my 2 top guys.
Yeah, for me, it's Harden, and then Durant and Boogie are tied. The only reason why I have those 2 tied right below is because I didn't necessarily want to pay up for Boogie, which we'll talk about later, but his usage rate without Gage is absurd.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. I think my 2 top priorities of the night are Chris Paul and DeMarcus Cousins. I understand Harden. I want him in GPPs. I understand Davis. I definitely want him in tournaments. But I think for cash purposes, Cousins' usage and Paul's consistency are where I'm leaning. You guys kind of tackled Harden, so I won't go there. But how about on the other side of the ball? How about Eric Gordon? I think he might be one of the best value plays, if not the best value play of the night. I think he led the team in scoring last time when he came, and all he had was a finger injury. So even though he's been out for a while, I mean, he played a full allotment of minutes. This isn't a guy we're worrying about a minutes limit because of an extended length of the broken finger. I mean, this is a guy who steps back in to his old role. Again, I mentioned that Holiday's usage goes ways down without him because he's a pretty big scorer. So I think Eric Gordon, 5,100 on DraftKings, 5,300 on FanDuel. I think you can play him legitimately anywhere. Will Barton, we used him the other night. He kind of flopped, but I'm not giving up to the fact that I think this guy's might be their top scorer without Gallinari. He started completely terrible and finished with 21 fantasy points, so he recovered a little. I don't think he'll shoot so terrible throughout the course of the game today in a much better matchup. And the only other name that I want to mention is Chris Middleton, at least 21 real points and 41.25 fantasy points in 3 consecutive games. That's not really a game I'm targeting, but Middleton's been so good. I mean, he's up there with Jimmy Butler in terms of minutes played, so there's a lot of opportunity for him. I think he's a solid play. You could mention Oladipo. I mention him every time, but I don't want to get Skiles tonight with all the other options. So is that pretty much covered the shooting guard position, or does anyone have anything else to say?
I love Oladipo.
Yeah, I was going to say I like Depot as well, but I'm not going to pay up that much for shooting guard with Harden being the other guy. I actually like Jordan Clarkson a lot too, who's eligible shooting guard on FanDuel. He has 34 or more FanDuel points in 5 of his last 7 games. Lou Williams out for a week. I think Kobe is going to play. But earlier in the season, Clarkson was actually better with Kobe on the floor. Now, of course, with Russell on the floor, it takes away from his ball handling duties a little bit. But all those guards for the Lakers may be in play tonight, especially in a good matchup.
Anything else, Nick?
I got a whole list of shooting guards, much like you do. I like Nick Batum against the Sixers too. He turned it around last night against the Suns. That might have been his remedy. 6 of 10 from the field last night. 30.8 FanDuel points. I think he's back on the radar against the Sixers, and his price is way down. I like Andrew Wiggins as a tournament play. I like Lance Stevenson against the Kings. I don't know if he's been starting, but he's been playing like starters minutes for them. And then I think you covered it, but Oladipo, touching on him again. I think it's a great night to go back to the Magic after none of their starters played like more than like 25 minutes. So for tournaments, I think getting on the Magic could be a winning strategy there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I was one of the guys who got roasted yesterday, so I'm not in a hurry to go back, even though I know it was probably an enigma. I mean, again, as you mentioned, they only played, I think Vucevic led the team with 24 minutes. So, in terms of a back-to-back, you can't worry about the minutes anymore because it's not like they played heavy yesterday. And if you were watching the game, Dallas went on a 13-0 run to start the third quarter, and that's why they all got benched. The thing is, if someone were to go on a 13-0 run today, they might be back on the bench. So, again, it's a little bit of a risk, but those guys have been such good value for, so long. It's only inevitable that at some point they will get benched again, but I doubt, Skiles does it back-to-back nights, although who knows with that guy. Let's move on to small forwards. I wonder if we're going to have a consensus here that small forwards probably a position to pay up for at least one of them tonight. I think the two guys that stand out for me are Kevin Durant, who's been incredibly consistent against the Clippers. I mean, a faster-paced matchup. I don't think they have anyone who even remotely matches up against him and can guard him, and Kawhi Leonard. Is that where you guys are going, or what are you guys doing at small forward tonight? We'll start with you, Josh.
I'm not necessarily on Leonard, and it sucks really because I'd like to play him, especially in cash because he's really safe. But I think with the way that the slate's going, I'm just going to pay up a little bit more, about 2,500 more on DraftKings and FanDuel. I know it's a little bit different on Fantasy Draft, but I got to go with Durant. I mean, I know I mentioned Chris Paul, I know I mentioned Harden. I'm going to have to pick probably two of those three, but Durant right now for me is probably number two, tied with Cousins, as I mentioned earlier. He's just been unbelievable against the Clippers, and I think part of that has to do with the fact that Chris Paul has played very good defense against Russell Westbrook. In 7 of his last 8 games, Kevin Durant has 42 or more FanDuel points, and that's a ton. He has back-to-back 60-point fantasy point games. He's number 2 on our matchup tool tonight. And one of the things about this game is it's probably going to be the most heavily targeted, and for good reason with that pace, with that over-under. And it should be a close game as well, as I think it has a very low point spread.
There's breaking news. Jahlil Okafor is out. So
Jeremy Grant again. There he is.
Yeah, you want to talk about him?
He plays a ton all the time in fast-paced games, and I think that we've seen his ability has gotten a lot better. He's played well over 30 minutes in back-to-back games. So with Noel at the center position and Jeremy Grant probably playing the 4 or even the 3 a lot, he's going to get a good matchup against Marvin Williams, or even if Cody Zeller comes off the bench without Jefferson getting a boost in minutes as well. So I do like him as a punt, and I think he's a perfect guy to pair with a guy like Durant.
Nick, you want to touch on small forward tonight?
Yeah, I'm not paying up at small for tonight, which is going against the grain from you guys for sure. I think the highest I'm going to go is Trevor Ariza at 6,500 on FanDuel. He's just been filling it up across tons of stat categories: boards, points, assists, blocks, steals, whatever you want. I think it's a prime matchup. The Hornets are 30th in defensive efficiency against opposing small forwards, so I think I like this spot for Ariza. And I like Jay Crowder, who's kind of a similar player to Ariza at 6,400, right below him. But if I'm not going that high, I like Matt Barnes again against the Kings. He should play a lot of the 4 because the Kings don't play that big with Quincy Acey playing the 4 these days for them. And I like Shabazz Muhammad against the Wizards. He's been getting a lot of run lately, and the Wizards aren't very good against wings. He played 34 minutes last game, but that was kind of a blowout. But he was playing 20 to 25 before that and still hitting 5x on FanDuel.
Yeah, I know Collacchi will probably touch on Muhammad too, but let me go down my list. I think Leonard, you guys might be overlooking him. I mean, he's kind of hit his stride once again. He was frustrating for a little bit, but now over his last 6 games, at least 40 fantasy points in each. We know, again, like Jimmy Butler, like Middleton, I mean, this guy's a minutes eater, so he's going to play a ton for the Spurs. Maybe the only guy on the Spurs you can rely on to play big minutes. Can everyone still hear me? I think I just froze for a second. Okay, good. So Leonard's definitely a guy I'm looking at. We covered Durant. How about Matt Barnes? Collacchi and I were kind of looking into him before the show. The numbers don't necessarily back it up. He's basically the same usage with and without Gasol, but he scored at least 16 real points in back-to-back games, and this is the Sacramento Kings we're talking about. So I think at least two of the Grizzlies are going to turn out to be like extremely viable tonight. Two of them are going to be way better than their salary suggests because they're playing up in pace. They're playing against the worst defense. I think Barnes is going to be one of those guys. He's been up in the mid to upper 30s in terms of minutes, so that alone against the Kings is interesting to me. Paul George, he's a tournament guy for me just because he's kind of a step below Durant in terms of pricing, and he's got 31.2% usage without CJ Miles, so that's a step up for him. And Milwaukee is lacking against wings, and Kalachi's going to kill me for saying this, but I think he needs to be mentioned tonight because of 29 minutes last game. How about Jakar Sampson for the bare minimum on both FanDuel and on Fantasy Draft? I mean, if you're playing studs, here's a guy for the bare minimum you can plug in there. I think, to match up against the Lakers, he's going to be playing more. I don't think he's any good. I think he stinks. Let's put it that way. I think he's horrible, but he's going to play some minutes, and he's minimum price. Kalachi, do you want to yell at me?
What are you doing? What are you doing? You got 11 games, 22 teams. You're going to go Jakar Sampson. You're going to go Jakar. I'm out. Go ahead, Nick. I can't. I'm done.
Well, look at this. You would have to start a lineup with, say, Durant, Paul, and Cousins, and then you plug in Jakar Sampson with them. I mean, you wouldn't be doing it for no reason.
It's Jakar Sampson. There's no reason at all. Man.
I'd probably go Isaiah Cannon around that. Lance Stevenson, just not punt that with that play.
Yeah, it's a total punt. I'm just throwing it out there. And also, someone pointed out, I skipped him on my list, Giannis Antetokounmpo. I'm actually waiting for the Michael Carter-Williams news with him because he's their ball handler without Carter-Williams. I think the matchup's only mediocre if Carter-Williams plays. If he does not, I think, Giannis immediately on triple-double watch once again. You guys agree?
Totally. I used him last game over Durant, and it worked out perfectly.
So
because he outscored Durant, yeah.
Yeah, my only issue with him is the matchup against Paul George, but you have to look at Giannis, and he's 6'11". He's probably still growing. Guy's been growing for his entire career. So he's a guy that doesn't necessarily have somebody that can just lock him down because he's so long, he's so fast. When he gets out in the open court, there's really nobody in the NBA that can prevent him from either scoring or dishing out an assist because, honestly, the only other guy that can move like that at that size is Durant, right?
Yeah. I mean, you got Paul George on him. He's still going to dish out the assists. He's still going to rebound. He's 6'11". So even if the matchup is mediocre, when he's the only ball handler, I think you got to use him. Kind of regardless of matchup, unless it's Kawhi Leonard. But
Giannis' game has grown so much from the start of the season. I remember watching him against the Blazers earlier in the year when he still had a huge game, but he could not hit a mid-range jumper whatsoever. But he was just knocking them down last game against the Rockets when they were giving to him.
Yeah, I'm happy that the Sixers passed on him for Carter Williams. That was awesome. Loved it.
There's the Sixer pride coming out in full force. All right, let's move on to power forward. Honestly, power forward, I mentioned a lot of guys at point guard tonight, but power forward is where my list is just intense.
Same here. I got like 25 guys on it.
Yeah, I think power forward is my toughest choice tonight. This is just loaded. I mean, the no Taj Gibson news means Bobby Portis is probably, someone you got to lock into cash. You've got DeMarcus Cousins without Gay. You've got Zach Randolph without Gasol. So how the hell are we supposed to figure out just two guys to play, Kalachi?
Well, the first guy I'm going to click on is Bobby Portis. I think that basically is the reason why power forward wasn't as difficult for me as it should have been, because with Gibson out, I mean, you can just kind of plug and play this guy. He's going to be in probably every lineup but one. I do think for those that do play a lot of lineups, make sure you have at least one lineup without a guy, even if you love him, if he gets hurt, if he underperforms, stuff like that. But he's going to be in my cash lineups. He's going to be in most of my GPP lineups. That price for me, considering he's going to start. He has a good matchup against Orlando, who's 25th against power forwards, even with Aaron Gordon in the lineup. And Bobby Portis is very efficient. He averages over a fantasy point per minute this season, which is huge. And it's just 4,400 on FanDuel. I think he's just barely over that, 4,700 on DraftKings. Does that sound right?
Yes.
So yeah, if you combine those,
4,800.
there you go.
4,800.
So 4,800 over a fantasy point per minute over there. You're looking at probably 28 to 30. Just that's just if he plays normally. So considering that matchup as well, I think it's going to be a little bit faster pace with the athletes now on the floor, with the exception of Pau Gasol. So I think that's going to be one of the plug and plays of the night, and I expect him to probably be the highest owned player at that position by far.
I've been looking at my spreadsheet this whole time. I just changed it to the camera to look at you. I didn't realize you had the Fernando Rodney look going with the tilted hat. It took me 45 minutes to notice that, but there's your analysis from our Fernando Rodney here at RotoCurve.
Just be happy you didn't see my face with Jakar Sampson was mentioned.
Yeah, actually, I did turn to that, and you were like falling off the screen. So
Yeah.
that
I
was
ran
the one
over
part I
something.
did look.
I don't know what it was, but
I don't know if you've ever heard Chris D'Elia, his stand-up. He's one of my favorite comedians, and one of his jokes is how some people don't just laugh; they relocate. And that was exactly that was exactly what you did when I talked about Jakar Sampson. But Nick, who do you like at power forward? I assume you're on Portis. Who else? Who else do you like?
Yeah, I'm locking Portis into cash games like Collacchi. Both you guys are probably saying. I don't know if you even talked about him, Mickey. I kind of was zoning out there looking at some injury stuff. But I like Aaron Gordon a lot again. I think, like I said earlier, I think this is a great spot for the Magic guys to bounce back. Get him at lower ownership than normal, coming off that terrible game. And I like Gorgie Jang against the Wizards. I don't think he was injured. He missed practice the other day for some personal reason. I think he's supposed to play.
Yeah, he
And
is.
if the brow sits, I like Ryan Anderson a lot against the Rockets too.
Yeah, I think you gotta like both their power forwards, actually. I think Davis, whether he plays or not, and Ryan Anderson, this is going to be a high-scoring game. I certainly, as I mentioned, if you guys have ever looked at the site Massey Ratings, there's a college professor, I forget where he teaches at, but he does his own projections for what the game should be like the night before. And so I like to compare those to the lines. And Minnesota was like nowhere close. I mean, it was 210, and the line came out, it was 220. So that shows you that maybe this is a game that's going to go under. Do you agree with that or disagree?
I agree with that probably.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not sure because usually when you watch the Wizards, they just every game seems to go over. But with the fact that Minnesota has Dieng and Karl Anthony Towns, I don't see them running the floor a whole lot, although both are athletic big men. So this might be a game that Gortat and Markieff play together a lot. And with all those bigs, that would be four bigs on the floor, basically at 7 feet or 6'11". That game could definitely hit the under. I agree.
yeah. So, in terms of pace, I think, Pelicans, Houston's going to be substantially higher. That doesn't mean I like the plays more. I just think it's going to be quicker paced. But for power forward, I think if I were playing FanDuel, it'd be Portis and Zach Randolph for me. And Randolph has been nothing short of disappointing recently. I mean, his rebounds you'd expect without Gasol, we'd be talking like the old Randolph, 20 points, 10 rebounds, basically a night, and he has not been getting to double digits. I think it's once in the last 6 games he's been double digits, but what he has been doing is kicking up the usage and scoring points. And if there's one thing that you're going to do against Sacramento, it's score points, especially against power forwards. There's only one team that allows more fantasy points to opposing power forwards, and that's Houston. So, I mean, Sacramento just a nightmare against them. So I think Randolph, going to score 20 to 25 real points, and hopefully with this pace, we'll get 10 rebounds out of him too. I mean, I'm looking at FanDuel 6,600. That sounds awfully cheap for him, right?
Yeah, he really hasn't been hitting 5x too much over on FanDuel. I know. I think his last game was pretty good though. What did he do last game? Yeah, he went 22, 4, and 6 for 36.8 FanDuel points. But the games before that, he wasn't hitting 5x, which is what you want on FanDuel.
Right.
Yeah, he just his rebounds, like you were saying, just make me nervous. He only has double-digit rebounds twice in the last 10 games. He had 4 against Denver, 4 against Phoenix. That's worrisome to me, I think.
That's why we like Matt Barnes, because he's getting in there playing the 4 and soaking up and grabbing all those rebounds. He's had 8, 7, 6, and 5 the past 4 games.
Right. And I mean, I doubt there's going to be a lot of Randolph Boogie matchups. I think they're going to start with Anderson on him, which is why I kind of liked Anderson for some minutes, but at the same time, you got to figure, a hack like that's probably going to be in and out in 2 minutes. But I think, just because of they're going to score 108 points, everyone does against the Kings, I think Randolph's in for some extra production. So he is worrisome. I look at that stuff, but for this matchup, I'm in. I'm way in. You guys agree, or you're just too worried for Cash?
No, I like Randolph a lot. I like him.
Okay.
I definitely perfect for cash.
Yeah, I don't hate him. I just think with all of the other matchups or all the other guys you can look at, like Gordon's right there, Jabari Parker's right there, although he has a little bit of a tougher matchup. Julius Randle as well, a guy I like against Denver. I just don't think that I could take the risk on a guy that could score 20 points but still get less than 30 FanDuel points, which is just not worth it for me, especially in cash.
Did my lower third get turned off? Do you still see the Ricky Sanders?
No,
No.
disappeared. Andre Johnson ate it again. You got all kinds of stuff. You
I
said
got all kinds
Jakar
of.
ate it. Everybody,
Oh
all
well.
right, you're lower third. That's what happened.
Well,
Speaking of Jabari Parker, how about that call by Ricky last time we were on the show?
Yeah, he had 9,000 fantasy points the other night.
oh man, Jabari
That's
that night
shocking.
was. The sad part is he was the second best play on Milwaukee. I mean, Giannis that night was just ridiculous.
Yeah, I faded Parker somehow and still won because I played Giannis,
Yeah,
thankfully.
man, that night was just all Milwaukee. I don't think tonight's going to be all New Orleans against them, but yeah, that was quite the night to stack. I don't think we're gonna. What do you? Well, let me ask you guys. Do you think three guys from a team is going to win a tournament tonight?
I think it could be the Magic tonight, man. The Bulls are dog crap right now, man. They just do not stop anyone. I think it could be the Magic tonight, like I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, you could probably get all of them for under 10% with the debacle we saw the other night. So if Skiles doesn't just completely limit those guys, I'm with you. I think a three-guy Magic stack in one or two lineups maybe tonight, you're going to get them at low ownership, and against the Bulls, it's well worth using.
Yeah, the Bulls have allowed at least 100 points in 14 straight games. So
There
you
you
think
go.
Jimmy Butler not a big part of the team in terms of offense and defense? You're wrong. Let's put it that way. Let's go over some other options. I think Julius Randle's in play again tonight. I don't love him as much as I did last night, but I think he's a threat for a double-double again. I think Darrell Arthur, if you're punting, for some reason his minutes have been way up. I mean, he's been finishing games. Collacchi and I were on Jokic the other day, and we were watching that game, and we were not happy. Let's put it that way. Jokic played 8-minute stints in half, was absolutely awesome. They pulled him and didn't bring him back, which I have a hard time understanding, but that's just the way it was. You guys mentioned Gordon. I think Derek Favors is a tournament-only play. He's been playing some really good ball recently. The matchup isn't especially nice, but I think he's going to be low-owned. And how about Markieff Morris, just because of his role? I mean, a lot of minutes. I think he's locked in as the starter now next to Gortat. And you guys mentioned that game's going to be fast-paced, so maybe he's a cheap way to get a piece of it. Anything else you guys want to go over the Boogie versus Davis thing, just so people know which side you're on?
I mean, I play on FanDuel, so it's not really a thing for me.
That's right. Kalachi, why don't you tell me if you were going DraftKings, you were paying up for one. Let's go cash or tournament. Which way are you going and why?
I think it would be Boogie for me for cash game because he has a safer chance to get to 40. But I think just because a lot of people will play him over Davis in cash, it makes a lot of sense to play Davis in tournaments because against the Rockets and that matchup, he has that massive upside. And of course, you guys all know on DraftKings, you do get those bonuses for double doubles, triple doubles. You get a little bit more for blocks or for rebounds and assists as well. So a guy like Davis could put up a huge number on DraftKings, and that to me is worth it in GPPs. But I can't go with a guy like him over Cousins at a similar price in cash games.
Nick Cannon is starting again, just so you know. So
Yep,
that
and Taj Gibson just got ruled out.
Nick Cannon starting for what team?
Nick Cannon was married to Mariah Carey for a long time. I was not a fan of his. That was my woman growing up. That was my crush. So Nick Cannon was not was not on my good list. Let's put it that way. Um,
And Cameron Bairstow is starting for Taj Gibson, so I think
oh,
that'll push
Oh,
Portis's ownership down, which is
yeah, I can't
I'm not
wait.
worried about it,
Yep.
honestly.
Fairstow gives up 3 buckets in 14 seconds and gets pulled, right? Is that about right?
oh my
Yeah.
God, Bearstow is one of those like zero point 0.3 fantasy points a minute type producers. I mean, if
So
you get
like
a rebound
Jakar.
from, yeah, yeah, basically. But I think Jakar is going to actually get serious minutes. I think Bearstow is just posturing to
Oh, yeah.
Portis in. I mean, I think he plays 10 minutes.
It's probably
So
better for us too because Portis will be in with like the second unit a lot, and he'll get better usage with that group.
yeah, well, you know what else that does is that makes Pau Gasol one of the best plays on the slate. I was telling Kalachi that before, but I mean, Pau Gasol with let me give you the fantasy points per minute is 1.19 with Gibson, 1.35 per minute without him. So I mean, you replace Gibson with Portis, at least there's someone who's viable. You replace him with Bairstow as a guy who does nothing. I mean, now we're talking Rose and Pau do literally everything in the offense. So
Yeah,
there you
I don't hate that at all. I don't hate Gasol at all tonight. But
yeah,
if I'm paying up for those other three studs, I'm just not gonna be able to use them.
right, right. I actually think Gasol is viable in both. I think if you don't want to spend up for Boogie, I think especially on fantasy draft, he's a guy you could fade Boogie for and get. I don't want to say similar, but you could get similar value out of Gasol. Let's move on to center. Nick, who do you like at center? I know Cousins is a center on FanDuel, so I assume that's where you're starting.
No, we talked about it before it came on. I think I'm going Nikola Jokic in cash.
There, that's right.
Ooh.
Explain
I just
yourself.
Okay, here we go. The Nuggets have played two teams that just play super small the past couple of nights, and who are those teams they played? They played the Grizzlies, who have been playing super small without Gasol, and then Dallas, who played small by limiting Zaza's minutes the night before that. So that took Jokic off the court, but the Lakers play big with Randall and Hibbert. So I just think this is a game for Jokic to bounce back, and he destroyed the Lakers like a couple months ago, or I think it was last month with a 25 and 10 line and 30 plus FanDuel points. So I love that spot for him.
Collacchi, are you on board with taking the shot on Jokic?
I love him in tournaments, and I actually just looked that up when you were talking, Nick. He did have a huge line. He had 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 2, shot 71% from the floor. Now, that does seem like an unsustainable line, but against the Lakers, you can shoot 70%, especially with his skill level in the middle. But yeah, I think I'm on board with him in tournaments, but I can't trust what they're doing with their centers in Denver because it almost seems like at every timeout, Michael Malone's the coach there, just kind of looks at his clipboard and just whichever name sticks out to him first, he just puts them in their lineup. I don't understand what's going on. I definitely think that Jokic is the most talented player probably on that team aside from Will Barton, but I don't think I can pay for him in cash simply because of the fact that his minutes aren't trusted. For the guys I do like in cash, although I'm not sure I love this price, I do love Dwight Howard tonight. He
Me
faces the
too.
New Orleans Pelicans. Yeah, the 28th against centers. He's expensive on FanDuel at 8,100, but I do think that's safe for cash games because he's had last 4 games, ready? 30 and 13, this is points and rebounds, 11 and 14, but that was against San Antonio. He had a 19 and 13 line, and then he had 13 and 16 with a bunch of blocks and steals, and that was against a slow-paced Utah team. So he's been playing very well of late. He's gotten a lot of minutes, and then a great matchup against the Pelicans. And even if that game it does play small, he's one of the more athletic bigs. I think he's pretty much a lock for 15 and 10. And for me, I'm willing to take that floor in cash with definite upside in that matchup.
Nick, we have a reader who wants to know your thinking here. He says, you said you were not looking at previous results earlier in the show. Now you are for Jokic. What's the deal?
Well, I looked at the Lakers are just terrible against centers, man.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get
They're
it. Just
30th
explain
in
it.
defensive efficiency against centers, man. Come on. I just
Yeah.
used the past results to back up, like I said.
Yes, exactly. No, against the Lakers, I mean, centers are a sure thing. Even Mike Malone, who's one of the, the touchiest coaches in terms of minutes disparities, got to realize that Jokic, one of the best young offensive players we have in the game. I don't know if you guys follow Arturo Galletti. Do either of you guys follow him?
No,
Uh,
I've heard
I
of
think I
him.
have a list with him on there, but I don't think I follow him, no.
yeah, so he does basketball statistics, and he compiled. It's a stat. I forgot what he calls it. It's like total offensive rating or something. It factors in their whole offensive game. And for a young player this season, Jokic has the second highest rating of anyone since 2000, I think, higher than Karl Anthony Towns and just behind Andrew Bogut. So that's how good of a young offensive season Jokic is having in terms of, at least per minute basis, and they're not playing him. So it's ridiculous. I mean, this kid needs to be on the floor. I don't necessarily think he's better than Karl Anthony Towns or fully buy that statistic, but I mean, he's incredibly talented, passing, shooting, rebounding. I mean, he's a hell of a player. So I really hope that they play him tonight. I just in cash because it's Malone, it's difficult, but in tournaments, I mean, every day I'm on board with him in tournaments just in case. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that all of his matchups and when he does play, You saw that stretch where he played 25 or more minutes in 4 or 5 straight games, and he had basically 45 fantasy points routinely. So I do think the talent is there. We're just waiting for the fact that maybe he gets the call, maybe he gets the starting nod and plays over 25 minutes consistently. And when he does, he's going to be in my lineups all the way until he costs 7,000.
Just to go into how I build cash lineups, I mean, I take a lot more risk than probably normally other people do because I want upside. And if I'm just playing all the chalk guys, I mean, everyone's playing the chalk guys, and you're not moving anywhere with that lineup because if one of them sucks, and then you're just sitting terribly with everyone else below the cash line. So I like to take a little more risk with some upside. That way I can spread myself out for everyone else.
Yeah, I agree with that thinking. You gotta differentiate yourself somewhere. Definitely, especially with the way DFS is these days. Everyone's got all the information, so you gotta switch it up. Let's go over some of the other center options. Does anyone like Karl Anthony Towns, or is he just the guy that's expensive around, the Dwight Howards, the Gasols, the Vucevic's that you're not going to spend up for tonight, even though he's obviously a monster? What's our feeling on Towns?
I'm not using him against Gortat at that price.
Yeah, I had him just show up instantly or initially, but I can't pay for him over Howard. Cousins really isn't that much more. Vucevic, of course, is an excellent option. We talked about him in back-to-backs, so I don't necessarily think I'm going to pay for him in cash games. Maybe if the price fits, I'll use him in a GPP, but I think for just $400 more, it's worth going all over him.
So here's one for fantasy draft only that I've been kind of looking at. The game's in San Antonio, so I kind of don't like that in terms of Detroit, but someone's going to have to score against the Spurs tonight, right? And Stan Van Gundy plays his starters big minutes. Well, in terms of fantasy points per dollar, just but going by their season averages, no one is better tonight than Andre Drummond at 13,900 on fantasy draft, just 13.9% of your budget. If we're looking at DraftKings, he's basically sub a $7,000 player. And I know the matchup is tough, but at that price, would you consider using him in any format?
The Spurs' interior defense has been just terrible lately.
Spurs, yeah.
Say that again,
Collacchi
Nick?
was cutting out there.
Yeah, it's tough because you do get that double-double bonus, which basically is a lock for Drummond. I'm looking back at maybe some of the tougher matchups he had. Against Cleveland, he had 16 and 15. They're good against centers. Toronto's a good defensive team. He had 15 and 18. I think for that price, you can look at it because, like you said, he's basically a $7,000 player on DraftKings with the same scoring. And the chances of him getting 35 or higher, I'd say, are pretty high even against San Antonio. And I don't see him being a massive upside play, and I don't think you want to play against the Spurs in cash. So he's a guy that's kind of just kind of have to stay away from and go with somebody else at that price, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with you. So let me go through if I were playing FanDuel. I think my number one priority would be Howard that we already mentioned. I think he's just such a lock against New Orleans. I think my second priority over DeMarcus Cousins would be Pau Gasol. I think I really like his price. Maybe FanDuel it's a little high, but DraftKings, for sure. And I think fantasy draft in my cash lineup, I'm fine going from Cousins to Pau to get that upgrade. We didn't mention DeAndre Jordan in that fast-paced matchup. Guys averaging, above 15 rebounds a game. I know Steven Adams is kind of a good defender. Do you think that he benefits from no Griffin and maybe he goes for, a 15 and 20 double-double and really makes it worth it? His price is $7,600 on DraftKings. It was, floating above 8,000 for a little, but it's back down. So do we like it, or are we just like the other guys better?
I think I'm on the other guys more, but I'm trying to look up. Does anybody have numbers on whether or not the Thunder have fouled him? Because if they play Hacker Jordan, I definitely think he's worth using because he's going to be very low owned. I'm going to see if I can look that up real quick.
Yeah, look that up. I love looking at that. I know San Antonio is one of the Hacka teams, so I like playing big men against them sometimes. And now that I say that, Andre Drummond, how about that? I know they Hacka Howard when they play him on occasion, so maybe Andre Drummond gets those extra free throw opportunities. I know Popovich not afraid to use that strategy. Some of the other, just the cheap options, just to mention them in case anyone wants to go cheap. We mentioned Jokic. Al Jefferson, I want to use because he had a nice game last night, but it was only in 19 minutes, and now it's a back-to-back. So he scares the crap out of me, but I do want one tournament share with him just in case. Tim Duncan, I think the matchup against Andre Drummond, they will use a lot of Duncan tonight, so I actually think he's safer than normal. And we mentioned Chris Anderson for tournaments only because he's so cheap and it's the Kings. But at the same time, I think he could foul out in 5 minutes against DeMarcus Cousins, so there's certainly risk there. Collacchi, do you have our free throw data? And also, do you want to mention Vucevic on back-to-backs? I know we talked about that before the show.
Yeah, I have both these sets of data actually right here in front of me. It's a site called StatMuse. For those of you that are familiar with it, it's a great tool. For those that aren't familiar with it, you basically type in a question Google style, and it gives you some results. So yeah, DeAndre Jordan had 22 free throws against OKC 2 times ago, but all the other times 4, 4, 0, 8, 11, 4. So it doesn't really look like they hack a Jordan a lot. It looked like that one particular time was just based on game flow or maybe how the game was going at that point based on winning or losing. So I don't think you can count on that. But as for Vucevic on back-to-backs, usually when a guy plays on a back-to-back, especially big men, usually look at less minutes. But a guy like Vucevic has 36 or more FanDuel points in 8 of his last 10 games on back-to-back. Now, that's very significant because, as we just said, bigs tend to sit a little bit more. But those 2 games that he didn't have it, he had less than, I believe, 20 minutes in each game, which could indicate foul trouble or an injury or something like that. So it's definitely significant. And adding on top of that, he has an elite matchup against Chicago. So I think he's definitely a guy you want to target, although I do think it could be overpriced. Now, when I see a guy that's overpriced, usually that just means cash games. So I think Vucevic in cash games tonight, if you do want to differentiate from Howard, but I don't think I can pay up for him in tournaments because of that number.
All right, we're running short on time. We've covered just about everything. So why don't we go to bold calls and our favorite guys of the night? We've kind of gone over this, but I know some people tune in late. I'm looking at the chat. It sounds like some people missed the point guard section. They missed other sections. So let's go with our bold calls and who we like as our favorite plays of the night. Nick, you want to start us off for this one? What would your bold call for tonight be?
The winning GPP lineup will have 4 Magic in it. That'll be my bold call.
Wow, going back to that, Hazonia is starting. I assume you saw that before you made that bold call. Maybe he gets back in it. He was horrible last night because of everyone getting skyled. Who are your favorite? Go over again who your locks are?
Chris Paul at point guard, Kemba Walker, I love him. D'Angelo Russell, you got to play him still at point guard. So, do you want me to go over every position or just stick at point guard and you guys can do your point guards too?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Just go over, your few best guys. That's all that's necessary.
Yeah, Paul, Kemba, and D'Angelo Russell are my guys at point guard, and then Isaiah Cannon since he's starting at min price or 3,700 on FanDuel.
Okay, Collacchi, your bold prediction and the guys that you really like above all the others tonight.
My bold prediction, actually, the first 3 or 4 words were the same as Nick's, the winning GPP lineup. But I don't have 4 Magic. I do have Shabazz Muhammad. I think he's going to be in the winning GPP lineup tonight. I think he has the upside to score 20 real points against the Wizards, who, as Nick mentioned, do struggle against the wing. So I think the guy like that at 4,500 or a little bit more on DraftKings is going to be upwards of 25 or 30 fantasy points. Pair that with a Magic stack, as Nick just mentioned, you could have a lot of points and a lot of money left over to spend on Cousins, Harden, and maybe even Kevin Durant.
There you go. There you go. I'll start with the guy. I'll start with my bold call. We'll go with that. I really like Zach Randolph tonight. I always go against the Kings. It's kind of my trademark at this point. But I think Randolph in this matchup has to get it done. I think we're looking at a 40 fantasy point night on DraftKings, and we're looking at a 20 and 10 double-double finally. I think he gets on the rebounding off the rebounding schneid, I should say. I think Anderson might be in foul trouble. I think they might need him more than they've needed him on the boards yet, and I think he has a monster scoring night. He's too underpriced, especially on FanDuel and Fantasy Draft. I think he's going to be a staple in pretty much all my lineups tonight. As far as guys that I'll be using everywhere, I mean, Chris Paul, I really like. I think I like Zach LaVine more than you guys. I think I like Eric Gordon a real lot, and I think if you use those 2 shooting guards, you can fit a whole lot tonight. I like Kawhi Leonard. At center, I like Dwight Howard. So I think if you start with those guys, you're doing well tonight. before we finish out the show, anyone else, did we forget anything? Any comments? You want to wish Jim some good luck in the delivery room?
Yeah, I did get to touch on a couple cheap centers I like too,
Let's
and
go.
that's Steven Adams against the Clippers. Clippers are a terrible rebound team. Adams' minutes were way down last game, but he was in foul trouble against Boogie. Had 5 fouls, almost got his lights punched out. But I love him against DeAndre Jordan. He should get plenty of rebounds in that game. And then Mason Plumlee is always one of my favorite plays. He's always overlooked against the Celtics as a perfect matchup. They're running the offense through him. He's running the pick and roll with Lillard and McCollum, so I like him a lot.
That was pretty amazing. I can't believe Boogie didn't throw that punch. That is a big improvement from the old Boogie. I don't know if you saw that, everyone, but there was a video where Boogie was, I don't want to say pulled down, but Adams was kind of falling on his foot and he couldn't get up. And Boogie turned around and went to swing back and came like close and stopped, which is basically how Collacchi and I are verbally throughout this whole show, except the punches are usually thrown, especially when it comes to Jakar Sampson. Collacchi, you want to touch on anyone else or wish Jim well in his quest with the new child?
Well, first things first, I got to figure out how to use Photoshop because I'm going to get a screenshot of Steven Adams and Boogie and place our heads there and maybe have the car sampling in the corner or something like that. But yeah, I just wanted to mention real quick to Jim, yeah, if you're watching, which you may be, I know you could be in the delivery room with iPads, phones, computers, making your lineups and stuff. But yeah, good luck on the baby. Give your wife the best, and I think I speak for all of us here. We can't wait till you get back.
There's one good question in the chat room that I think we should answer before we go. We got a few minutes. How many studs would you recommend playing on both DraftKings and FanDuel tonight with the values? Do you think there's enough value to play 3 studs on DraftKings? I would assume that's probably too much, but what do you guys think? Before I give my answer, I want to know. I know, Nick, you've kind of got your lineup figured out. What's the answer for FanDuel?
Yeah, I always try to fit 3 studs no matter what, like any night. So that's the way I start my lineup. So I pick my 3 favorite studs, and then I just go for value train around them.
Collacchi, what do you think for DraftKings? 2, 3?
I think you got to get 2 in if you can because of the value that we can find with Russell and Bobby Portis. Although I do think you can make a very nice mid-tier lineup tonight. I think it's one of those nights where the studs may be so highly used. And if you miss a guy that has 70 or 80 fantasy points, which could possibly happen with these studs in these matchups tonight, it's going to be an uphill battle, even if you get a whole bunch of guys with 5 or 6 sets. So for me, I think you got to get Harden plus one other stud. It just comes down to being either Durant or Boogie for me.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a one-stud night for me because the best values I see are Gordon 5,100 and Portis 4,800. Usually when there's a guy basically bare minimum starting, that's when I start to look, hey, can I fit Chris Paul and Kevin Durant? But I think there's plenty of mid-tier tonight. You shouldn't have any issues setting a lineup. The question is who to play. It's not there's only 4 guys to play. Who the hell am I going to play with them? There's 700 guys to play. Which should I limit them down to? So that is all for us today. We're going to go a few minutes short, but hopefully you enjoyed. I don't know about you, Collacchi, but I'll be in the chat room helping people out for the next hour before lock, so you can catch us there. Again, don't miss the free roll this Friday. That is rotocurve.com/free roll /again. Just want to make that clear. Check out the NBA tools. If you need anything, message us. We are out.